Amanda is setting up. Just a quick introduction. So Amanda is going to be talking today a little bit about two different lakes, the Salton Sea and also a bit about Lake Chad. So Amanda is from Los Angeles. She's a graduate from University of Berkeley. But yeah, why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself, Amanda, and take it away.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so in May of 2017, I graduated from UC Berkeley. I studied in environmental social science. So that's pretty much, I think, all that you guys need to know. So can everyone see my screen? Does it look like a presentation?
Yep, you can see it.
Yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, so I think I'll get started and then I'll talk a little bit about Los Angeles and why I'm talking about the Salton Sea. So Salton Sea, an abandoned water crisis, my name, Los Angeles, California. Hopefully everyone's a little familiar with Los Angeles. So what we'll cover today, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I chose this topic. Los Angeles to the Salton Sea, the history of the Salton Sea, the location, what went wrong with the Salton Sea when I visited back in 2015 and 2016, the history of the Salton Sea, the animals that are impacted by it, the issue, and then really the reason why I wanted to talk about Lake Chad was because I wanted to open it up for discussion, because I've never been to Lake Chad, but I know some of the people that are online listening right now live near the area, so I would love to create or have it as more of a discussion. So comparison to Lake Chad, solutions, and then we'll open it up for questions. Am I talking too fast? Can I get some input?
Yeah, maybe you could slow down just a little bit, Amanda.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Cool. Okay, so I'm from Los Angeles, California. I tried to put some pictures that you guys might be familiar with. This is Venice Beach, California. Then we have just beach. This might be Santa Monica area. And the Hollywood sign. So this is all part of Los Angeles County. I live in Westchester. It's a suburb. There's not really anything here. So I just put the major parts of Los Angeles. Okay. So Los Angeles is located here on the map. And the Salton Sea is about 3 hours out. It's over here. And we also have Joshua Tree National Park. This here is the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. And so when I went to the Salton Sea, I took this route. Yeah. So the reason why this is so important is because the Salton Sea by car is only about 3 hours. And so in the 1950s, it was a major tourist destination. Let's see. So this is what it looked like in the 1950s. You had your classic 1950s United States kind of cars. And here's the Salton Sea, which is actually a lake, but it's huge and it looks like a sea. And people used to come from Los Angeles to the Salton Sea, and it was their vacation spot. And so they had their boats, and they would hang out and party, vacation. And we have a postcard, a letter from a hotel or a motel from back in the day in the 1950s. But the thing is, more recently, it no longer looks like this. So when I recently went in 2015 and 2016, it was a lot more like polluted, and it's no longer a vacation spot. This is like a hotel. This used to be a pool. You can tell it's graffitied and it looks kind of like deserted. Nobody's really living there. And another issue is this is the sea. There's a lot of like dead fish in the area or at the sea because there's not much oxygen in the water. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But so this was around the sea because this was the vacation spot area, and this was the actual sea. So when I visited, to give you an idea of what it was like, it smelled like dead fish, as you can see here. The smell was really strong, and then it looked like a sea because it was huge, but it's actually a lake. And back in the day, in the 1950s, I'm sure there was a lot more people, and so it's probably louder, like a lot of people screaming and having fun. But now it's very like isolated. There's not a lot of people there. It's no longer a tourist destination. There's just a lot of like birds that are flying around the lake, and I'll talk about that later. So here's some pictures from the lake, from the Salton Sea. And I'm sure this used to be like a house where like people used to stay in, but now like there's not many people there. I didn't have a picture of myself, so I just put one for my Facebook. Okay, and this here is like the actual sea when the sun was setting. And when you're like walking around here, it's like I was walking in my sandals, and I had a few people come up to me and tell me to like put tennis shoes on, just because of like it being a hazard. Okay, so some background history. So it's originally from the Colorado River. Let's see if I have a picture. Cool. So the Colorado River is here, and then we have Mexico and California. So Los Angeles is pretty close to the Mexican-California border. And so we have the Colorado River, and the flooding occurred here. And this flooding resulted in what we now know as the Salton Sea. So it wasn't really planned. I believe the levees that were here were actually man-made, if I'm not wrong. I tried to find it online, but I couldn't find any articles saying if it was man-made or if it was natural. So for 16 months, floodwaters poured into the Salton Lake Sea. You can see here. And so yeah, just flooding. And so this flooding, which was an accident, caused or created the tourist attraction that we were talking about earlier. And it wasn't just a tourist attraction for people, but also animals relied on this water, the Salton Sea. And we'll see that here. Okay, so a lot of birds actually rely on the Salton Sea when they're migrating, when they're going from one place to another. And something important to note is 90% of California wetlands are actually gone, making like the Salton Sea a really important part of California, especially for the birds. So we'll talk a little bit about these birds. I don't know too much about birds, so if any of these look familiar, maybe we could talk about these later in our discussion. So 95% of North American population of the eared grebes may use the sea, and then we have 90% of American white pelicans. 50% of ruddy ducks, and 40% of Yuma clapper rails, which are actually like endangered. So this one here is the endangered bird. So yeah, it has many benefits because the birds rely on it, and then the Salton Sea actually has a lot of tilapia fish that are actually dying because there's not enough oxygen in the water. But so there's a major need for the Salton Sea for these birds. So when they're migrating, there's about 1 million eared grebes that rely on the Salton Sea. So without the Salton Sea, they'd have to migrate even further south. Let's see if I have, well, like further south, like further to like the Sea of Cortez, which is like Mexico. Okay. So yeah, it was like a disaster in the making. A major issue is agricultural runoff and it going into the lake. And so the runoff from the farms polluted with like pesticides, causing less oxygen in the water, which resulted in like the dead fish and the issue of eutrophication. Okay. So what it is today, a major issue right now is the water evaporating. And I could talk about this a little more if you guys want, but this was a major issue in a lake in Northern California as well. When the water evaporated, it kind of created these like toxic dust storms or like dust bowls. And so that's the major concern with the people that are still living near the lake in the Salton Sea is the air might not be breathable anymore. So the water leaves the sea mainly through evaporation, making the sea saltier, increasing the sea's salinity. And so the government solution to the lake in Northern California was irrigation, which can be very expensive. And so we'll talk about later some like one of the solutions. So without irrigation runoff, it could cause the Salton Sea to evaporate in as little as 15 years. That's what I read on one of the articles. I can send it to you guys if you want. So the sea is now 25% saltier than the Pacific Ocean. I can also send an article to you if you want for this one. So yeah, the major issue is evaporation because the sea is so high in salinity. Okay, so now I will compare the Salton Sea to Lake Chad. As I said before, I want to make this more of a discussion. And so for those of you who have been to Lake Chad or live in the area, after I go through my circle diagrams, I want to open it up for discussion. So the Salton Sea and Lake Chad both have water issues, and so we're going to compare both. So Lake Chad is between Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad. Okay, so Lake Chad is located in Africa. We talked about the borders, and the issue is the lake is shrinking. So I looked up some articles and we saw some similarities that I'll talk about in a second. So the Salton Sea is located in California. The issue is the increase in salinity, causing less oxygen for the fish, the tilapia fish in this water, causing them to die off. And then the birds that rely on this lake, it's really important to keep, to make sure that there's enough water and so they don't have to migrate further or stop over further. And then, yeah, and the people in the area also rely on this lake. So I saw some articles about people still like fishing in the lake for the tilapia fish. And it's also like some of these people, it was like their childhood or they grew up in the area and they don't want to leave, and the lake is a big part of their life. So similarities. It's a fresh water source for people that rely on the lake. If the people are fishing and the fish are dying off, that's a major issue. Degraded ecosystems, yeah, hard to fish. the bird migration stops, like if they have to stop further. I know some birds do rely on Lake Chad as well, and there are fish in Lake Chad. And then the location for both are like sandy, dry areas. The Salton Sea is in a desert. And so I think that makes the lake even more important, like super important, because it's in a desert and there's not a lot of like water access for the birds. And there's less rainfall in both areas. And we talked about like soil salinity. Okay, so I only put up one solution because I thought it'd be cool to have like a discussion and try to come up with other solutions. So the Salton Sea recently had a proposed solution by our government. So there was a Salton Sea management program for phase 1. It's a 10-year plan. So the Salton Sea will be pumped to ponds and mixed with agricultural runoff to create a habitat for fish and birds that's less saline, less salty than the rest of the lake. And then Lake Chad, I saw some action with governments near the lake collaborating and talking about different solutions. And so like planning to build a dam and 60 miles of the canal to pump water uphill from the Congo River to, I might mispronounce this, River Shari. So from what I've seen on both sides, there's been a lot of government action. But I do want to talk about, I know the Salton Sea does have a lot of people that live in the area that do care a lot about the lake, that they are like planning their own like grassroots movements. But these like grassroots movements obviously aren't being recognized as much as like government action because of funding, and they don't have like $1 million for like a project. Like I think this is somewhere around that price range. Okay. So what I've learned from reading some articles on both issues is even though there are many local activists who feel that they know what is best for their home, and there are a lot of grassroots organizations, the government is the one who really has a say to improve the situation. Even though the governments aren't the ones that are directly impacted by the water crisis. For example, with the Salton Sea, there are a lot of people that live right next to the Salton Sea, and they've lived there their whole life. And like I was saying, they fish in the lake, and they have tilapia. And I don't think the government officials that are making the decisions really like rely on the Salton Sea as much as the people do. Sorry, I hope I didn't talk too fast. So I want to open this up for discussion. If anyone would like to talk about Lake Chad or the Salton Sea, or if they have any questions, please do so. Please ask away.
All right, guys, any questions? Okay, I actually have a question or two.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, okay, someone's got a question.
It was me, Alvaro.
Hi.
Sorry. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
Fine. In the solutions, the last one in Salton Sea
Yes.
is Salton Sea will be pumped to ponds. So they are not trying to fix all the lake. They are like planning to fix it some ponds there, just a little space to put the fish there, and they are not planning to make something with all the lake.
Yeah, it's a really like difficult, there are like so many different solutions. One was like creating a pipeline from like Mexico and pumping it north to the Salton Sea. There have been a lot of different like solutions, but it's a huge lake. It's kind of like it's a big disaster. It's really hard to like think of like good solutions. Yeah. But what do you think would be a good solution in this situation for fixing the lake?
Okay, because okay, yeah, it's very complicated, but I think they need to just put more water there, like clean water. In Chile, we have this problem in Santiago, and they just they made a water purification plant
Mm.
in the north part of the city, and they use the houses city, like the houses water, they purificate and put in the lake before the process, no, later than the water past the process, they put in a lake, they put clean water from the city, and that is resulting in a good way. And they're just put pipelines in every pollution pollution found. They say, okay, we don't have the capacity to make all the people stop the contamination to the lake or to the river in this case. Um, so they put collectors for all the contamination, and they just use pipelines to take all the contamination to the water plant. I think that is a good solution. So they are not like, oh, it's not possible to all the people stop the pollution, but sometimes as a government you need to take a decision. Okay, they are continuing to pollute it, but we are going to do something with this polluted water, and they use it and put in the river a lot of water, and it's a good solution, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. So one question I have is in regards to Lake Chad and the Salton Sea. Okay, maybe not so much towards the Lake Chad because it's still used very viably for a food source and things like this, but maybe more towards the Salton Sea. Is there a use to save the Salton Sea? Like, for example, here in Malaysia, there is, we used to have a lot of these big mining quarries, which were filled with water and then ended up becoming lakes of their own. And there's one particular lake called Bukit Merah Lake, or the Red Hill Lake. And it was heavily polluted due to like some crazy industrialization nonsense back in like the 80s. And it's become like you can't use it anymore. The place is polluted, fish is dead, all that kind of things happen. And the only people really who are affected by it directly is the resort that was built specifically right next to this lake. And now that that resort is dead, they don't even see a need to restore this lake because it doesn't have any ecological pushback towards the surrounding. And at the same time, they don't see the need to spend all this extra money trying to rehabilitate a place that doesn't have a cause. So like, what about the Salton Sea? Are people like really putting, like, what is the need for having the Salton Sea around?
Yeah. So the Salton Sea is, like, as I mentioned, like huge. And we saw before in Northern California an issue with having like high salinity in a lake. And when the water evaporated at that lake, it caused these like really toxic like dust storms. And so people that are near that lake in Northern California have to like wear like masks sometimes when they walk outside because it's like so hard to like breathe in that area and it's not healthy. So I saw like, I don't think this is I don't know if it's a credible source, but I saw this Vice video on the Salton Sea, and they had like kind of like in an extreme situation, if all of this water was to evaporate, it would cause these extreme like dust storms, and it would impact like Palm Springs desert. They were even saying it could impact like Los Angeles people, Angelinos, and yeah, it's like, I think it's a movement. They're trying to get people in Los Angeles, because there's so many people in Los Angeles, to actually care. And I think their way of doing it was to kind of like put fear in the people in Los Angeles because of the dust storms. I don't know if that would actually happen, because when I was looking up articles, I didn't see anything that mentioned that. But like you were saying before, with the tourist destination and how the resort was kind of abandoned, the same situation happened here. This used to be a huge tourist destination in the 1950s. And when there started being like environmental issues, people just like ditched the lake and they left their houses, and the property value went down by a lot. And yeah, not many people are in the area now, and it's kind of like a deserted wasteland area. Yeah. But the need for it, going back to the need for it, would be if the water evaporates, then it could cause like really toxic dust storms like we saw with Northern California. Also the birds that rely on the lake, as well as like the fish and like the tilapia fish. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Hey, Amanda, I have a question.
Yeah.
Who is responsible for this land? Is it federal government? Is it state government or local government? And how did they get that role?
I think that's a really good question. I don't know too much about it. I'm guessing because I know the endangered, some of the birds that like rely on this land are endangered. I'm guessing the government probably owns some portion of it. But I need to look more into that. I'm not too sure.
Okay.
It's a good question though.
Okay, anyone else with any questions or anything like that? Or for example, if you know of any other places which are similar in a situation you'd like to share or ask about it as well. Okay, not everyone at once. Amanda, do you have anything else you'd like to share or mention? If not, we could actually.
Let me think. Let's see. I don't know. I guess we could open it up for discussion. Does anyone have anything that they want to share about water issues in their like homeland? Anyone?
I can go first on this one because I mean, water is obviously one of the most essential things for life. So, and especially in Illinois, we have a lot of it, especially compared to like California and Chile and other countries. So we've got a lot of surface water in lakes and rivers around Illinois, and there's a lot of pollutants in it, especially in the rivers because of all the farming and agriculture that's done here. So I was talking with some people this weekend about the Mississippi River, which is the longest river in North America. And it runs from almost up by Canada in a state called Minnesota, and then comes down into the Gulf of Mexico. And one of my friends lives about halfway down the river in St. Louis, which is where like Illinois and the state she lives in, Missouri, come together. And you can't go in the water. There's like public advisory saying no one should enter the river because all the barges that go through there just dump any like solid waste or whatever that that's from their toilets into the water directly, no treatment. There's both sides of the river are just lined with farmland, almost the entire length of it, except for cities like St. Louis and things like that. And then it really collects all the water that runs from between the two mountain ranges in the U.S., the Rockies and the Appalachians. That whole watershed kind of culminates in the Mississippi River. And so it's the quality of the water there, even when it's moving, is awful. And so it just makes the whole ecosystem unlivable. And then when it gets out to the Gulf of Mexico, there's just a big dead zone because all the nitrogen that has run off from the agricultural land just caused a huge algae bloom and then kills off all the fish because there's no dissolved oxygen in it. And so, I mean, all the agricultural land is, I mean, not really a natural use of the land, but like it's not developed land around it. It's not like there's big cities that are causing these issues. It's just from the farming practices we use. And there's no cleanup efforts on the Mississippi River because I think they've just accepted that we need to use it as a waterway and mode of transportation more than actual water, I guess.
Thanks for sharing, Sarah.
All right.
Yeah, does anyone else want to share?
Well, in Malaysia, we don't really have that kind of issue with fresh water, things like that. We do have a lot of rainfall throughout the year, but we do have some months, especially recently due to climate change issues of temperature fluctuations and longer drought seasons and things like this that have caused us to have sometimes water shortages because of our water retention dams are not up to level and they can't provide enough water. Like if you see recently, like that's in a lot of places around the world, that's been a very big use of these lakes, these Great Lakes, to provide fresh water sources. And especially now, for example, in South Africa, Cape Town is currently set to be the first city in the world that is about to run out of water. Some of our friends there, activists around, have been protesting about this, and it's mainly due to a lot of mismanagement and also at the same time the extreme weather conditions and their lakes just being insufficient to provide enough water for people's needs. And at the same time, all these other small lakes or other freshwater sources have either dried up or just become unusable, like Salton Sea, and also issues like with Lake Chad and other main water sources or water tributes around the world. But yeah, that's just what I think about this issue. It's kind of a very big thing, and a lot of people need to be thinking about how we are using our water sources. But that was just me going on a bit. Aaron, just now you raised your hand. Do you have a question or would you like to say something? Aaron? Okay, his hand is lowered now.
Yeah, I would like to talk about. Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Aaron.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying I would like to talk about when you look at the last slide of like both Lake Chad and South. Are you getting? Yeah. Yeah, I was talking about that slide, about the slide of comparison of Lake Chad and Salton Sea. When you look at the solutions proposed, one of them was pumping water from River Congo up to Lake Chad. You know, all this the solutions that are proposed by government sometimes can lead to conflicts within the basin. So I think, for example, for us in the Nile Basin countries, most of the solutions that we are currently proposed are resulting into a lot of conflicts within the basin countries. So I think it's not that slide, the other slide, the next slide, please.
Oh, this part?
No, the next one.
This one?
No, I'm not saying it. Sorry for that. So, but the whole point is,
Okay.
that shared lake basins result in a lot of conflicts, and its use requires participatory planning, and everyone should be involved in the use.
So you're saying not just government,
Thank you.
but the people too? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm saying everyone in the community of the basin should get involved, not only about the government. Like if you look at the proposed solution, you will just see only government action, but it should be both people and government, because if it's only about government, the views of the users themselves, which are the people around the water, will not be presented and can result into conflicts and other things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of touched upon that. Yeah, after. I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, do you mind? I'm going to butt in and kind of make a rebuttal. What would you suggest are some community-based solutions to that? What can the community do to address these water issues?
Yeah, one of the things that we can do to address these issues is like to try and unite all these communities together. Like we gather communities within the basin or representatives from these communities, then we come together on a round table, then we discuss the issues and we propose the solutions to them together, not as individuals or in just a single meeting room, but together with the representatives of all these communities together. I think it's better to find solutions from them, not solutions for them. So you engage them in discussions and you get solutions from them not to go with your solutions. Or in other cases, you can go with your solutions, but ask them on how best we can actually implement these solutions.
I think something to mention about the Salton Sea, like they have town hall meetings, and so all of these people would get together and talk about like the issues. But I think a major problem that I think you do a great job of bringing up is it's not just the government officials, but it's also the communities that should be with the government officials when talking about it. For the Salton Sea's case, I think there's a lot of separation between the people that live near the Salton Sea and the government officials who are making the decisions. Even though there are town hall meetings for the Salton Sea, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be like the government officials that are like making the decisions. So yeah, there definitely needs to be more communication between both groups. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I get it. Okay, that was all from me.
Thanks for sharing. Did anyone else want to speak?
Yeah, I don't think we got anyone else at the moment.
I've got one more question.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of brushing my teeth, so I got a mouthful. But I wanted to ask still. if this was your community, and this question is for everyone, if this was your community and you were at a meeting about the Salton Sea or Lake Chad, you can pick either, what would be your primary needs that you like would be requiring from a solution for it to be considered viable? And do you have any proposals that you would put forward? And I mean, we're not going to be like, oh no, that won't work. So just like shout out anything, any ideas you have. Because if it was your community and you were in the situation, like you just have to brainstorm and put up as much as possible. Put up as many ideas as possible.
Well, I would just simply put up a think tank, or just like get the government to come in and then just like, no, can't do anything to this lake no more. Or like, at the end of the day, a lot of laws put things in place, and actual like monitoring of those kind of things do make a difference sometimes. Yeah, I mean, like if you put out martial law, you can't pollute on this lake. If we spot you polluting, we shoot on sight. I mean, that would definitely deter a lot of people. But at the same time, there's a lot of like climate-related issues as well, like long drought seasons and things like that are definitely going to cause a lot of evaporation and drying. So that does come down to a lot of bigger key issues towards taking smaller issues like this, which are discussed in town halls or meetings or whatever, and bringing it towards federal, bringing it towards people who are actually making the policies, and show them this data that these places are being affected, these places are having severe problems because of climate change, and moving forward in that sense. That's kind of I would say, a need and a must, But yeah, that's just my opinion. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think a major reason why I wanted to do the Salton Sea was because it's such a big issue. Like, how do you fix something when it's already gotten to be such a big problem? I know that the locals in the area were really pushing for the pipeline to like pump more water into the Salton Sea to help with the high salinity in the water. But I don't know. I'm not too sure. It's hard to come up with solutions when you're already so far down the line and it's already such a big problem. If this was like the 1960s or something like that, and it wasn't as bad as it is today, then maybe the solutions would have been easier. So I don't know. I think if you see a problem, to address it when it's happening rather than like, I don't know, like 40 years later.
Question.
Yeah.
What? Sorry, Adrian here. What is the input factor for the water in the lake naturally? Is it that the rivers are leading to the lake and they're using up all the water leading to the particular area in Salton Sea?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that?
Okay, so I'm asking, what is the current water source leading to the Salton Sea? Is it that there are rivers leading to the Salton Sea, or is it just like a closed off area where there's no water input other than for rainfall?
Yeah, exactly. That's the major issue, is when there was the flooding that happened back in like 1905, the water flooded from the Colorado River, creating the Salton Sea, and the flooding happened for I think 16 months. And then after that, there was no like more water going into the Salton Sea. It was kind of just staying there. And so then you had the agricultural runoff going into the sea, and the lake was just, it was there. It wasn't moving anywhere. There was no more water coming into it. So that's, I think, that's what they're trying to come up with. The solution is like, how do we bring more water into the Salton Sea? And Yeah.
Oh, so it was created basically by that one flooding event, basically.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, as a geographer, there is nothing much that you can do with the drying off effect unless you have like one of those once in a lifetime events that happen to create in the first place. So the sad part though is that persons have created their livelihoods around what would have been a temporary natural structure, which yeah. So because of that one-off event that created that kind of lake in quote or sea in quote lasting, so because for example in Jamaica, one of my grandmother's community that happened somewhere close to our home community, and then of course the lake dried out right after a while, but we didn't have the same problem that you're having in Salton Sea in terms of the pollution, in terms of it being there long enough for fish and wildlife to expand that way. So persons didn't necessarily generate permanent livelihoods around it because it only lasted for about 5 or 6 years. So it just basically dried out. So what I would suggest is training persons to get alternative livelihoods outside of fishing in the area, because then you won't, unless another flash flooding event happens like that, you'd have to be continuously pumping water, which is unsustainable, right? So you're talking about energy, you're talking about water coming in from somewhere else. Yeah, so that would be unsustainable to do that. For the pollution, really and truly, that's only creating policies and implementing. This is a US based area, and they, well, not to kind of bash anybody from the US, but they seem to think that they're the crowning jewel in terms of implementing policies. And so that would have to be up to them to implement. I don't know with the current president that, that would be implemented quite in earnest, but that's what will have to happen. Strict monitoring and evaluations, setting out your objectives and goals, because of course, the pollution would still be there even when the lake dries out, right? It will be there in the form of the soil that is left behind. And so as the sea dries out, giving up back the land, you'd have to have, I would suggest, a reforestation of the surrounding areas, because trees are very good at removing pollution from soils. So you have to reforest the area as the water retreats, and then convert the area into agroforestry sustainable livelihood project or program. So as the water retreats, you don't have a full dust storm effect after the sea disappears. That's the only solution I'm seeing, based on what you told me about the history of the area. That's my contribution.
I love that. I'm sorry, did you talk about the fish or the birds that rely on the lake as well?
No, I didn't. But those fishes, I'm assuming, might have ended up there from the flooding event. Like when you have flooding events, it's going to push any biodiversity that comes from that original source into the river. In this case, it's fish. Of course, birds are highly mobile, and so they'll just go to wherever they can find a particular food source. So birds will always be able to be more highly migratory in this kind of instance. So of course, once the lake is still there, of course you'll see the bird population that feeds on those fish being there. So it's a matter of, for birds, it's a matter of relocating the birds. Unfortunately, for the fish, unless you're going to fish them out and then transport them to another area, they'll reduce in numbers over time. Because of course, based on the origins that you've told me, this would have been a temporary lake that was caused by a flooding event, and of course the eggs and other live fish that were displaced in that particular event would have also come over. So there is nothing much by the way that you can do to save the fish unless you're going to fish all of them out and relocate them. Which is why I suggested the agroforestry incremental implementation over time.
Yeah, just to add on to what Adrian mentioned, in Malaysia also, because we used to have these huge tin mines that over time, through flooding, through rainfall and all this, became natural lakes of their own, but again, temporary lakes. And now that things have become worse and there's a lot of evaporation and things like this, they've become cut off from the temporary rivers that were formed that actually gave rise to them. And like most of the fish or the wildlife in these areas, there was nothing about them that was natural in that ecosystem. And once, like for example, this Bukit Merah Lake, the one which I mentioned a bit earlier, that was polluted heavily. Once that lake became like not viable, it was just a big body of water that was polluting the ground, and that's the only issue they focused on, because wildlife at the end of the day was temporary and their surrounding was still sufficient to sustain them. So it might be a bit different with the Salton Sea because of the surrounding itself has very drastic changes, as well as like places like Lake Chad, where the communities around in the basin itself are quite different from how it used to be. But yeah, just that to add on.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, so does anyone have any questions or anything else they would like to add on? Because if not, I think we could maybe head to a closing remark from Amanda, and then we can end the night or morning for wherever you guys are. Anyone with anything? Okay, I'll take that silence as a no. So Amanda, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, please, hello?
Oh, okay, yes. Ngozo.
Yes. So I'm very sorry because I joined the meeting very late, but I think the presentation was very good, it was okay. And I appreciate the work done by Mrs. Amanda. So I'm sure that in the next time we will join the meeting very early so that we can join together. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Gozo. But yeah, if you're late, don't worry. You want to check out what happened earlier. There's a recording of this session. If you don't have access to it, don't worry. Just send an email to one of the coordinators and we'll get back to you on that. And yeah, Amanda, would you like to closing remarks or anything to say before we end?
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing your stories. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your sharing.
Quick announcement. And yes, thank you, Amanda, so much for putting together this presentation. We are still looking for someone to present on February 10th. I think we have someone for the 20th, and then the one after that will be the 28th because February doesn't have a 30th. So please sign up for webinars, talk to your partners, and get something put together so that we can hear about your story, your community, and the work you're doing, all right? And always, you can ask any of the 6 coordinators any of your questions, okay?